That morning began with an unexpected scene. Right in the middle of the luxurious Sterling Bank lobby, Andrew Coleman, the man destined to reshape the entire American banking system, was grabbed by a security guard, his arm seized, and pulled out the door like an anonymous troublemaker. The tug was so forceful that his ID flew from his wallet, spinning across the polished granite floor and sliding to the edge of the welcome mat. Everyone froze, none realizing they were witnessing the first drop of a coming flood. 5 minutes before that ruthless moment, Andrew had entered Branch 14, dressed so plainly that no one recognized him. Not the 43-year-old CEO behind an $80 billion banking empire. Not the architect of financial strategies that made Wall Street wary. Just a tired man, sleeves rolled up slightly, a slightly wrinkled white shirt, clean sneakers reflecting the light. He inhaled the scent of polished walnut, the steady hum of the cash counters, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards, all forming the mask of a smoothly operating system. But Andrew's heart was far from calm. It was bracing for an inspection he knew would hurt. Truth always did. He stood at the end of the line, fingers tapping lightly on the wooden counter eyes, following every small detail that laid bare injustice. A white man about 50, polite, dressed in a dark blue blazer, with neatly combed salt and pepper hair, withdrew $25,000 in less than a minute. No questions. No document checks. No delay. "Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Have a wonderful day." The teller's voice chimed lightly like a breeze. Same transaction, same bank, but two different destinies. When it was Andrew's turn, Megan Russo's eyes, the 28-year-old teller with heavy mascara and tightly pressed lips, glanced at him for a second, then turned cold as winter glass. "Fill this out," she said sharply. Andrew smiled, neither angry nor surprised. He had seen that look thousands of times in hundreds of branches, with dozens of customers he had hoped to protect. But today he wasn't observing from afar. He was here, among them. When Andrew placed the withdrawal slip for $15,000 and his driver's license on the counter, Megan looked at the amount and let out a sigh filled with doubt. Just a second, but enough to make the heart of a man who had survived countless financial crises skip. "This transaction, we can't process it." Words light as air, yet stabbing straight into Andrew's gut. He met Megan's gaze, calm to the point that she stumbled for a brief moment, quickly hiding it with folded arms. The previous customer withdrew $25,000. No one questioned anything. Andrew said evenly, the undercurrent of his breath, a fire compressed for years, months, days. Megan didn't respond immediately, her eyes flicking toward the glassed office where branch manager Karen Doyle stood. Karen nodded subtly, just enough to make Megan straighten her spine, lift her chin, as if Andrew had insulted the bank's pride. "I told you. We can't process it." In Andrew's mind, a question slowly, painfully echoed. Who do they think I am? Or rather, who do they think I am not? The sting of familiarity cut deep into every breath. Andrew didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. "I want to know why." Megan bit her lip, tapping impatiently on the counter, each sound dry, disrespectful. Suspicious transaction. Anti-money laundering policy. "This amount with you," she left it unsaid. Andrew heard the part swallowed with "someone who looks like you." That was when Karen Doyle stepped forward, 39 hair pulled tight eyes cold as steel. She didn't check his documents. She didn't verify his account. She did nothing a responsible manager should. Karen merely looked at Andrew for a few seconds and judged like a haughty magistrate. "We need further verification. Please wait outside." Outside. Two simple words, heavy as a slap. Andrew understood. This was no longer about rules. It was about people, bias, and the silent, cruel classification. I have all my ID, complete records, and none of you even checked anything. Karen didn't respond. She merely turned to the guard nearby. Tom, escort this man out. Escort a polite word, but what followed was anything but. Tom Hill, large, impassive, a man accustomed to orders approached, said nothing further, grabbed Andrew's arm and pulled hard. Too hard. Enough to make Andrew stumble enough to silence the lobby, enough to awaken old wounds in a man who had spent a lifetime building a system that now denied him. And then the ID fell fast, precise, painful. But the sharpest pain wasn't the tug, not the ID skidding away. The sharpest pain was the silent question. If today I weren't the CEO, how many others would be treated this way, and nobody would ever know? That was the moment Andrew understood. Today's journey was not just a test. It was the start of a battle. A battle he would not let anyone endure alone. And in just a few minutes, the world would know his name in an entirely different way. Yet at that instant, standing in the cold hand, clenched around the dust-covered ID, Andrew felt only one thing, the familiar pain preparing to become a storm. Just minutes after Andrew was pulled outside, he drew a deep breath, eyes cutting through the clear glass of the bank branch, where staff continued typing, interacting with clients, pretending as if nothing had happened. Morning light streamed through the windows, casting down onto the polished granite floor, reflecting every tense face while maintaining a veneer of civility. Andrew's gaze never left Karen Doyle, who had nodded in approval of the discriminatory act she had just committed, and Megan Russo, the young teller still standing frozen behind the counter eyes, chaotic. Andrew pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers swiping quickly across the screen as he called Samuel Green, the bank's executive vice president. His voice calm, but every word laced with undeniable authority. "Samuel, I need you at branch 14. Immediately." Within minutes, Samuel appeared, stepping into the lobby with the presence of a leader, eyes cold as ice, shoulders straight, no smile, only determination. The moment he entered, the atmosphere shifted the breaths of customers, and staff slowed the sound of keyboards, paused, leaving only the thump of hearts of those realizing the gravity of the situation. Samuel walked directly to Karen Doyle, asking in a firm tone, "Did you verify the account before denying the transaction?" Karen lowered her head, lips tight, a flicker of panic in her eyes. "No, I did not." A chill spread through the room like smoke. Andrew stood behind her, calm, his features composed, yet radiating restrained fury, latent power like a blade poised to strike. Derek Hill, the guard outside, stepped closer, voice low and steady. "I saw everything. What they did to you is not the first time." His eyes followed Karen, Megan, and all staff in the lobby, conveying both agreement and a rising hunger for justice. Samuel turned to the employees, his words falling like hammer strikes. "This entire branch is in serious violation of the bank's customer service policies. Karen Doyle, you are suspended immediately, and further disciplinary measures will follow." Megan Russo froze, lips pressed hands, trembling, a mix of fear and remorse flooding her body. Andrew approached the counter, calmly handed the withdrawal slip to another teller, and within an instant, the money was delivered exactly as protocol dictated. He turned to Derek, giving a slight nod. "Today you stood on the right side." Derek nodded, eyes meeting Andrew's, a fleeting smile passing between them, carrying renewed trust and acknowledged authority. Meanwhile, the rest of the staff seemed frozen, realizing that every unfair act had just been exposed and condemned in real time. Andrew did not look back, stepping outside cold wind brushing his collar, but this time it carried power and determination, not fear. Samuel Green followed, expanding the space, with authority issuing orders to the internal investigation team to document every action review, all recent transactions to identify patterns of racial bias or arbitrary enforcement. Some customers watched, astonished, realizing this was not a minor dispute, but a seismic event of justice unfolding before their eyes. In the accounting room, employees recorded every action, every word, their eyes no longer bright, but filled with tension, anxiety, and a hint of fear as they recognized that mistakes and biases could not hide from scrutiny. Andrew quietly stepped into the parking lot, phone in hand, observing the flow of cars, mind still focused on every detail, from Megan's gaze, Karen's gestures, to the faint smiles of the surrounding white customers. He knew that in mere minutes, the next steps would reshape the entire apparatus, affecting not just this branch, but the entire Sterling Bank system. Then he looked up at the towering building glass floors reflecting the sun, realizing true power was not in the seat one held, but in the ability to hold everyone accountable, even those who thought they could operate above the law and prejudice. At that moment, his phone buzzed. Samuel reporting all records and transactions had been cross-checked, repeated policy violations, identified particularly targeting customers of color and immigrants. Andrew felt his heartbeat rise, not from fear, but from the exhilaration of knowing a revolution of transparency was about to begin. The media storm had already ignited from a single customer's phone, recording the guard dragging the CEO out. Hashtags spread, comments flooded in, all eyes watching, and Andrew understood no one could ignore the truth now. Everything was about to erupt. He stepped into the car, started the engine, hand still clutching the recovered ID, a mix of anger and resolve coursing through him. This was not a moment of personal revenge. This was a moment of systemic justice, where every act of bias, every arbitrary decision would be exposed, assessed, and corrected. In the rearview mirror, Andrew looked at Samuel, eyes saying, "We will make everyone accountable. No one will evade responsibility." With a press of the accelerator, the car glided onto the street, and he knew that every step, every decision today would become a turning point, marking the beginning of a Sterling Bank, where customers would be respected. Fully, prejudice would have no place, and fairness would become an unshakable law. Just minutes after Andrew Coleman left the branch, his phone began buzzing relentlessly, each notification a heartbeat growing stronger, a shockwave spreading through the streets. The video capturing the security guard dragging him out had been uploaded instantly by a nearby customer, and within minutes, views skyrocketed, comments flooding in, outrage, disbelief, praise, and condemnation. Everyone realized that Andrew, who had appeared to be an ordinary customer, was in fact the CEO of the very bank they had assumed was safe and transparent. Social media erupted with the hashtag bank profiling, Twitter, Instagram, and financial forums overflowing with commentary about the injustice, about how a bank could brazenly apply bias right in the middle of the trading floor. Meanwhile, Andrew sat in his car, eyes in the rearview mirror, watching Karen Doyle, Megan Russo, and the rest of the staff frozen, realizing that every unfair action had just been exposed. He drew a deep breath, tension transforming into resolve. Andrew called Samuel Green, the executive vice president, issuing his command, calmly, but with absolute authority. "We start a full audit of Branch 14, cross-check all transaction records, identify all arbitrary decisions and discriminatory behavior. I want raw data, unaltered, unsoftened." Samuel nodded, eyes cold as steel, fully aware that this would be an unprecedented investigation. As social media continued to update, Andrew made another decisive move, calling Derek Hill the security guard who had witnessed the entire incident to the central office. Derek, 35, still feeling a mix of awe and pride, remembered how he had stood his ground. "You will testify to every action," Andrew said, his voice calm, but as firm as steel. Derek nodded, clutching the notes, documenting every gesture, every word, every avoided glance from Karen and Megan, knowing this time the truth would not be buried. Simultaneously in the boardroom, members received alerts about the spreading video, accompanied by thousands of comments, tweets and shares, leaving everyone stunned. Bank stock began to dip slightly, but Andrew paid no mind to the money. He saw the larger issue customer trust had been broken. He decided to confront the entire branch staff directly. Within 15 minutes, everyone was summoned into the conference room. They entered awkwardly, hands trembling, no one daring to meet Andrew's calm, piercing gaze. He did not shout or berate, only surveyed each person, letting silence become a wave tearing through deceit. Andrew began, "I want everyone to understand that the conduct at this branch is unacceptable. Denying transactions based on subjective judgment, based on skin color, not only violates policy, but destroys customer trust." Megan Russo raised a shaky hand. "Boo-boo, but you don't understand." Andrew emphasized each word, cutting through the space. "No, you understand perfectly. That conduct violated Section 4.3 on customer transactions. Everyone will be held accountable for what just occurred." Derek stood beside him, presenting the evidence he had recorded, every action, every word, every evasive glance of the employees. "I witnessed the entire incident. I will sign to confirm." All eyes turned to him, tension overwhelming the room, no one daring to interrupt. Andrew nodded slightly, voice calm yet commanding. "Megan Russo, Karen Doyle, and anyone involved today are suspended immediately pending disciplinary action. Anyone who engages in similar behavior will face the same consequences. This is not just a lesson. This is a declaration. Sterling Bank will never tolerate injustice." The room fell silent. Everyone felt the power not from words, but from Andrew's determination and meticulous preparation. Meanwhile, Samuel Green ordered a full audit of all 50 branches, cross-checking data, reviewing all transactions over $10,000, recording and monitoring for any discriminatory behavior. Social media continued to spread the video hashtags, trending the public outraged national media reporting. Andrew knew the impact would extend beyond Branch 14. This was the moment to set a new standard for the entire banking industry. In the central office, Andrew and Samuel monitored all branch reports, system data, and historical complaints. The truth was clear: many transactions had been denied based on subjective reasons, mostly affecting customers of color and immigrants. The figures were shocking but unsurprising to Andrew. He exhaled, then calmly drafted a comprehensive reform plan. All transactions over $10,000 would be recorded and monitored. An automatic alert system would notify employees before denial. A direct hotline to the CEO's office would be established for reporting injustice, and all staff would undergo mandatory training on awareness and bias prevention. Meanwhile, social media thrived independently, each share, comment, and video serving as proof that justice was no longer passive, but actively standing. Long-time customers sent letters, emails, and messages expressing gratitude and sharing experiences that had previously been overlooked. Andrew read each message, feeling the weight and significance of transparency and fairness. What began as a small incident of discrimination at one branch had now sparked a chain of systematic change. Derek Hill was promoted to National Transaction Security Advisor, overseeing and training staff across the system to ensure such errors never occurred again. The media called it the Sterling Bank Effect, a lesson in power transparency, and how one person standing against injustice could transform an entire industry. Andrew gazed out the office window, afternoon light reflecting off the glass floors onto the bustling streets below, exhaling deeply, both tense and relieved, knowing that today was not merely a personal victory, but a turning point for the system. Sterling Bank was no longer a place for prejudice, but a place where fairness would be paramount, where every customer, regardless of race or background, would be treated with absolute respect. And Andrew knew from this moment he was not just correcting Branch 14, he was writing a new chapter for the entire American banking sector, where justice was no longer theoretical, but practiced daily. The moment the decision for reform was issued, Andrew Coleman allowed no space for delay or avoidance each step he took, setting the pace for a revolution within Sterling Bank. Internal audit teams were immediately dispatched to all 50 major branches, every transaction record, every ledger, every withdrawal, denial report, analyzed, cross-checked and reconciled. In the central office, large screens displayed data from the branches, numbers dancing charts, showing each declined transaction, recording the dates, times, amounts, and reasons noted by employees. Samuel Green stood beside Andrew, emphasizing every detail to the lead audit teams, identify all irregularities. Every sign of discrimination, every decision based on subjective judgment must be recorded. Nothing can be overlooked. Each line of data appeared like a living testimony, the screen light reflecting on the tense faces of the audit teams, yet highlighting Andrew's unwavering determination. This was a moment that could not fail. He moved from screen to screen, eyes tracking each branch, each employee, each transaction, sensing the patterns of racial bias and arbitrary policy enforcement laid bare. Derek Hill, now National Transaction Security Advisor, stood nearby, noting every piece of evidence, his gaze betraying both admiration for Andrew and concern for what was to come. The data revealed over 20 transactions declined in the past 2 years, at Branch 14 alone, mostly affecting customers of color or immigrants, with similar cases emerging in multiple other branches. Historical reports had been vague, unusual transaction, customer requires further verification, but when cross-referenced with account records, they proved that the denials were based on individual bias, not factual data. Andrew listened as Samuel explained each branch, each pattern of violation, then gazed out the window over the streets of Philadelphia, feeling the afternoon sunlight reflect off the glass buildings where customers walked into the bank, trusting they would be treated fairly. He knew that without immediate action, the trust would continue to erode and the system's integrity would falter. Andrew opened his laptop, reviewing comparison data with old reports, checking each reason for denial, emphasizing every word in the internal report. I want real data, unaltered, unsoftened. Every customer must be treated fairly. Samuel nodded hands, gripping the laptop handle, knowing that every word and number on the screen was now undeniable evidence. While social media continued spreading the video of Andrew being dragged out comments from the public former customers, and those who had experienced bias poured into Sterling Bank's inbox, Letters, emails, and messages carried frustration and outrage, yet also hope as people witnessed someone standing up for fairness. Andrew read each one, feeling every pulse of wounded trust being restored. He knew this was not merely about dismissing a few employees or auditing Branch 14, but an opportunity to change the entire system from within. He immediately decreed all transactions over $10,000 must be recorded and monitored. An automated alert system would notify employees before denying a transaction, and a direct hotline to the CEO's office would receive reports of any discriminatory conduct. All staff would undergo mandatory bias awareness and anti-discrimination training. In the operations room, audit team leaders recorded every report, their eyes tense but determined, knowing that history would remember this moment. Branches that had previously applied policies arbitrarily would now face strict oversight, with no room for discretion or personal prejudice. Andrew stood in the operations room, eyes following the staff, each word, each action, each number displayed on the screens like a living map of justice. Derek stood beside him, looking at Andrew and saying, "You've accomplished what many only dare to dream." Andrew smiled, not with personal satisfaction, but with the weight of responsibility. The responsibility to transform an entire system, restore trust for thousands of customers, and ensure that anyone entering Sterling Bank would be respected regardless of race background or status. Meanwhile, social media continued to update clips, spreading rapidly from Philadelphia to New York, from Chicago to Los Angeles, creating a massive wave of public reaction. Media outlets reported, financial bloggers commented, investors watched closely. Andrew knew that today's actions would not only impact Sterling Bank, but serve as a wake-up call for the entire banking industry, where transparency, fairness, and accountability were becoming vital standards. Every decision, every action from this moment forward would be monitored by the public, by customers, by employees, and by regulators. Andrew picked up his phone, sending messages to all branches. Implement the new procedures immediately. All transactions over $10,000 must be recorded and monitored. Verification steps cannot be skipped. Any violation will be addressed strictly. Samuel moved through the room, each step, each action radiating authority and determination. This was the moment to lay the foundation for a completely new Sterling Bank, where fairness was no longer theoretical, but practiced daily. Andrew knew that as branches received these directives, as employees realized that every arbitrary action would be exposed, Sterling Bank would transform at its core. A media storm had begun, a reform was underway, and Andrew stood at the center, like the eye of the hurricane, guiding, controlling, and ensuring that justice for the first time was truly enforced. Less than an hour after the video of Andrew Coleman being dragged out, went viral messages, tweets and clips spread like wildfire. Every forum, social media platform, and financial channel was flooded with discussion. Sterling Bank had discriminated against its own CEO. Right in the lobby, an unprecedented event in modern banking history. The hashtags bank profiling, justice. At Sterling and CAO thrown out exploded with thousands of views, comments, and shares within minutes. Short videos recorded on customers' phones captured every gesture, every glance, every reaction of the bank employees, now living evidence. National media jumped in, broadcasting live commentators, analyzing each action, every procedural mistake. Meanwhile, Andrew sat in his car, eyes fixed on the lobby through the rear-view mirror, breathing evenly calm, yet mentally taut, each thought focused on justice, power, and the weight of responsibility. He knew that every word, every glance in the video had traveled farther than any internal decision, that the public was now an unerring judge. Immediately, Andrew called Samuel Green, the executive vice president, his tone calm yet authoritative. "Samuel, they want every employee at Branch 14 in my office within 15 minutes. All records and data must be ready. Nothing can be overlooked." Samuel nodded, understanding that this was a historic opportunity to set a new standard for Sterling Bank. In the conference room, Andrew stood among the employees, seeing through every eye and gesture, no one daring to hide fear or remorse. He began, voice calm, but each word striking like a hammer. "What just occurred at this branch is unacceptable. Denying transactions based on subjective judgment on the customer's race or background destroys trust and violates Sterling Bank's customer service policies." Megan Russo, the young teller, lips pressed tight hands, trembling, looked at the floor. Karen Doyle, branch manager, pale eyes wide in realization of the gravity of her actions. Derek Hill, who had witnessed the entire incident, stepped forward, voice low but firm. "I saw everything. I can confirm every action, every word." Silence filled the room, the pressure thick like an invisible wall. Andrew scanned the room, voice calm, yet sharp. "Megan Russo, Karen Doyle, and anyone involved in this conduct, you are suspended immediately pending further action. Any similar violations will be treated the same. This is not just a lesson. This is a declaration Sterling Bank will not tolerate injustice." The employees froze, realizing this was no longer an internal matter. The public was watching, media analyzing, and every wrongful act would be exposed. Andrew continued, each word like a blade. "I will not only reform Branch 14, I will reform the entire system. From now on, every transaction over $10,000 must be recorded and monitored. The automated alert system will notify employees before any denial. All discriminatory behavior will be reported directly to the CEO's office." Derek nodded, eyes shining with belief and authority, knowing he would now participate in overseeing the entire system, ensuring no mistakes would recur. Simultaneously, internal audit teams began reviewing all major branches, every report, every transaction, record cross-referencing with customer data and previous complaints. Charts and reports appeared on large screens, revealing patterns of violations, arbitrary denials, discrimination based on race or immigrant status, all flagged for Andrew's intervention. Meanwhile, national media broadcast live clips spread across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, with thousands of comments analyzing the event, warning the banking sector about standards of fairness never before enforced. All eyes now were on Sterling Bank. Every event measured by views, shares, comments. And Andrew knew that every action he took was not just the start of a reform, but a cultural shift for the entire industry. Andrew stood in the conference room, observing trembling employees, the data on the screens, the alerts from social media, feeling the weight of true power. Power does not lie in a title, but in the ability to hold people accountable, to ensure the system operates lawfully and fairly. He exhaled deeply, eyes on the parking lot, where afternoon light reflected off glass buildings, seeing customers entering the bank with the assurance that fairness would no longer be theoretical, but action. Samuel Green stood nearby, deliberate in every step, knowing this was a historic moment. Andrew looked up at the ceiling, sunlight streaming through every pane, reflecting off the floor, emphasizing the transparency and clarity he was enforcing. Branch employees understood that every violation would be recorded, every arbitrary decision exposed, and Sterling Bank would leave no room for prejudice. Every transaction now would serve as a reminder: fairness is immutable law. Andrew looked at Derek and Samuel, voice calm but resolute. From this moment, every customer, regardless of race background or status, will be treated with absolute respect. No room for bias, no room for imposition. Sterling Bank will become a symbol of fairness and transparency. No one spoke in that moment, yet the power radiated throughout the room, the branch, and across the bank network. Media customers, employees, all witnessed a historic moment. Andrew picked up his phone, issuing directives to all branches, recording monitoring automated alerts, direct hotline to the CEO, and mandatory bias awareness training. From today, Sterling Bank would be different. A storm of reform had begun, and Andrew Coleman was at its center, eyes bright with trust, strength, and the responsibility of a man standing to transform an entire system, restore confidence for thousands of customers, ensuring that fairness was no longer a slogan, but a living, repeated action every day. And from this moment, Sterling Bank had entered a completely new chapter. Less than a few hours after Andrew Coleman implemented the reforms, Sterling Bank became the center of attention across all media. Every image and clip of Andrew being dragged out, spread across social media platforms from Twitter, Instagram to YouTube, attracting hundreds of thousands of views and shares, comments overflowing with outrage, surprise, and agreement. Financial bloggers posted detailed analyses exposing flaws in transaction procedures, highlighting injustices that customers of color or immigrants had endured, emphasizing that Sterling Bank, one of the oldest and most respected banks in Philadelphia, was no longer a symbol of transparency, but a living example of systemic bias, while simultaneously laying the foundation for a revolution in customer service awareness. Andrew observed everything from the central office: heartbeat, steady eyes tracking every report, number every comment and share every chart, displaying branch performance, every record of unjustly denied transactions, recognizing the true power to enact change did not lie in firing a few employees, but in creating a ripple effect where every wrongful decision would be exposed, every coercive action verified, and every customer's rights ensured. Internal audit teams worked continuously, comparing data, cross-referencing denial records from more than 50 branches, discovering dozens of cases similar to Branch 14, mostly affecting customers of color or immigrants, and all reports proved that decisions based on subjective judgment had occurred repeatedly, each figure recorded meticulously by day, by hour, by employee, and Andrew used this as the basis for comprehensive reform directives. Meanwhile, calls, emails, and messages from customers nationwide began pouring in, expressing gratitude, empathy, and even the pain of past injustices. Andrew read each message, feeling the weight and responsibility on his shoulders, realizing that fairness and transparency were not merely internal matters, but the trust of customers and the credibility of the entire industry. Andrew and Samuel Green quickly established new regulations. Every transaction over $10,000 must be recorded and monitored. The automated alert system would remind employees before denying any transaction. Every complaint regarding discriminatory behavior must be reported directly to the CEO's office. All staff would undergo mandatory bias awareness and anti-discrimination training. Derek Hill, now National Transaction Security Advisor, began visiting branches to guide staff and oversee the implementation of the new system. Branches that had previously applied rules arbitrarily were now required to follow every step, precisely leaving no room for discretion, and internal reports showed that in the first days, the rate of unjust transaction denials dropped significantly. Customers began noticing the difference, and positive feedback flooded the bank's inbox. Meanwhile, social media continued circulating the original video, now accompanied by images of changes and responses from Andrew and Samuel, further inspiring the public and spreading the story of a CEO daring to confront injustice, creating a powerful ripple effect. Posts, clips, and hashtags, such as Justice at Sterling Fair, Banking and CEO Action, appeared everywhere, journalists and financial bloggers analyzing each reform step, from handling offending employees, auditing branches, to implementing recording, monitoring, and automated alerts. Andrew realized that true power was not in the title of CEO, but in the ability to transform the entire system's mindset, turning every transaction, every word, every action into living evidence of fairness. Employees one by one felt the pressure, but also recognized the opportunity to learn correct mistakes and understand that Sterling Bank had now become a place intolerant of bias. Andrew observed everything from the central office fingers, lightly pressing the keyboard eyes, following every chart report and message, feeling both tension and exhilaration, knowing that every piece of data, every action, was unfolding exactly as he had planned. Long-time customers sent letters and emails expressing gratitude for feeling truly respected. For the first time, even those who had previously experienced discrimination. Other branches looked to Sterling Bank and began self-adjusting, spreading a culture of fairness. Competitors took notice, regulators increased scrutiny, and the media called this the Sterling Bank effect. Andrew picked up his phone, messaging all branches, "Implement the new procedures starting today. Any violations will be addressed strictly. Fairness is law, no exceptions." In the office afternoon, light streamed through the glass buildings, reflecting off the bustling streets below. Andrew exhaled deeply, sensing that the storm of reform had begun. Sterling Bank was systematically transforming, and from this moment, fairness, transparency, and accountability became immutable principles, no longer theoretical, but living actions repeated daily, marking a new chapter in banking history where every customer is treated with absolute respect and every arbitrary action is exposed under the light of justice. The following hours became a continuous chain of movement within Sterling Bank, every eye watching every action and every word recorded and analyzed. Former customers, new customer staff, and even those who witnessed the incident online felt a spreading power, the power of truth, the power of justice being restored. Andrew Coleman stood in the central office, hands resting on the cold glass desk eyes, tracking every piece of data on the screens, every social media response, every report from the branches. He heard the constant ping of notifications, alerts of comments, videos, shares, hashtags, Justice at Sterling and Fair Banking echoing in his mind, knowing that what had just happened had created an unprecedented ripple effect. Derek Hill, National Transaction Security Advisor, stood beside him, notebook in hand, eyes reflecting trust and pride, seeing that all Branch 14 employees now understood that misconduct could no longer be hidden, that the truth would always be acknowledged. Andrew began a virtual meeting with all branch managers, voice calm yet as sharp as steel, I want everyone to understand that from this moment, every decision, every transaction must be fully transparent. Any violations of fairness will be recorded and addressed strictly. No exceptions. Every customer, regardless of race, background, or status, deserves absolute respect. Every screen lit up charts displaying previously denied transactions, subjective reasons, patterns of discrimination, and Andrew systematically highlighted each branch with repeated violations, every employee responsible for unfair conduct. Meanwhile, social media continued circulating the original video, now accompanied by updates, suspended employees, comprehensive reforms, recording and monitoring systems, implemented automated alerts, active comments, expressing admiration and support for Andrew, flooding in inspiring customers who had once faced injustice. Samuel Green coordinated the internal audit teams, cross-referencing data from each branch, compiling detailed reports, emphasizing irregularities, branches denying transactions over $10,000 without verifying data, mostly affecting customers of color or immigrants, and previously unassessed reports. Andrew listened, eyes glowing with determination. This was not just a lesson for Branch 14, but an opportunity to reset the culture of the entire bank, to demonstrate that fairness could become a vital principle. Derek stood beside him, noting every piece of evidence, every action, eyes fixed on Andrew with complete trust. You've created an unprecedented turning point. Andrew smiled slightly, not from personal satisfaction, but from understanding that every number, every piece of data, every customer response was now living proof of a transformed Sterling Bank, where fairness and transparency were no longer theoretical, but action. Branch managers heard Andrew emphasize all transactions over $10,000 must be recorded and monitored. Automated alerts will notify employees before any denial. A direct hotline to the CEO will receive all reports. Mandatory bias awareness and anti-discrimination training was deployed immediately. All employees knew that mistakes or misconduct would be exposed, and the public would witness it. Meanwhile, former customers sent emails, letters, messages recounting experiences previously overlooked, expressing gratitude as they saw Sterling Bank truly changing, and Andrew read each message, sensing every heartbeat, every trust being restored. Social media continuously updated videos, tweets, comments about Andrew and Sterling Bank's changes appearing everywhere from Philadelphia to New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. The national public watched media outlets and financial bloggers analyzed every reform step in detail, from suspending employees, auditing branches, implementing recording and monitoring systems to mandatory training on bias awareness. Every action Andrew took was now not only the beginning of internal reform, but a powerful message to the entire banking industry, signaling that transparency and fairness were unbreakable laws. In the central office, Andrew looked at the large screens displaying reports, seeing each branch, each employee, each violation, marked every positive customer response, appearing eyes lighting with trust and determination. Sterling Bank would become the benchmark for fairness and transparency, where every customer is treated with absolute respect, where every arbitrary decision is exposed under the light of truth, and where the values he had built from the bank's inception are restored and elevated to a new level. Every clip, every tweet, every response proved that from this moment, fairness was no longer theoretical, but a living action repeated every day, marking a new chapter in Sterling Bank's history, where every customer, regardless of race or status, is entitled to absolute respect, and every act of injustice is held accountable. Less than 2 days after Sterling Bank announced its reforms, the effect had spread throughout the entire banking industry as other branches began reviewing every transaction over $10,000, immediately uncovering cases of arbitrary denials that had previously occurred without data-based justification. National media jumped in with sensational headlines. Financial news channels broadcast live analyses of every action and violation at Branch 14 and other branches. Social media was flooded with hashtags Fair Banking Justice. At Sterling, the clips of Andrew Coleman being dragged out, now serving as a symbol of justice in the industry, spreading from Philadelphia to New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, thousands of people viewing, sharing, and commenting. Responses from former customers and those who had faced discrimination years ago began pouring into the bank's inbox, recounting stories once overlooked long silent pains, and Andrew read each email and message, feeling the weight of trust that had been stolen, now being restored, realizing that this change was not only an internal reform, but a turning point for the entire industry. Samuel Green continuously updated reports from the internal audit teams, reviewing each transaction record, every denial report, every documented reason, cross-referencing numbers with customer data. Charts revealed recurring patterns of discriminatory behavior across multiple branches, mostly affecting customers of color and immigrants. These figures, previously ignored in old reports, now became living evidence, every detail recorded for strict action. Andrew pointed to each chart on the screen, voice calm yet firm. I want every branch to understand that from now on, fairness is not optional. It is an immutable principle. Every violation will be recorded, every complaint reported directly to the CEO's office. No step may be skipped, no subjective judgment applied. Derek Hill stood beside him, noting each piece of evidence, eyes shining with determination, knowing his role was now more critical than ever, overseeing all branches to ensure the new regulations were strictly enforced, and Andrew knew that every action taken today would create a ripple effect throughout the industry. Former customers continued sending feedback, expressing gratitude and renewed trust, many recounting experiences where transactions were previously denied or they were treated with disrespect, now being heard and acknowledged. At the same time, competitor banks began observing, studying the measures, some implementing similar practices to avoid public relations crises and protect their reputations. Federal regulators issued warnings requesting reports on large transaction procedures and anti-discrimination compliance. And Andrew, together with Samuel, prepared all documentation, ensuring all data was transparent, unaltered, and unsoftened. Social media continued updating constantly clips of Andrew being dragged out, now accompanied by evidence of reforms, admiration and support flooding in inspiring thousands, making Sterling Bank a symbol of fairness, transparency, and accountability in banking. Andrew monitored all reports, charts, every previously denied transaction over $10,000 compared against actual data, feeling the power of transparency and truth, knowing that every step today would not only correct Branch 14, but transform the awareness across the entire network and the American banking industry. Derek Hill went branch to branch, guiding employees to implement the new procedures, ensuring they understood that all misconduct would be recorded, all arbitrary decisions would be scrutinized, and every transaction was no longer an opportunity for bias. Other branches observing Sterling Bank recognized the change and began self-adjusting, and the media dubbed this the Sterling Bank effect, a symbol of industry-wide cultural change. New customers entering the bank immediately noticed the difference. Transactions processed quickly, respectfully, and transparently. Complaints reduced significantly within the first few days. Andrew stood in the central office, hands resting on the cold glass desk, eyes following all data, all customer feedback, all shares and comments across social media, feeling the pulse of justice spreading. Knowing that from this moment, Sterling Bank was no longer a place for bias, but a place where every customer is treated with absolute respect, where fairness and transparency are no longer slogans but living actions repeated daily. And from here, Andrew Coleman had laid the foundation for a new chapter, where the bank's reputation was built on trust and respect, leaving no room for arbitrary decisions or imposition. A few days after Sterling Bank began implementing its reforms, hundreds of emails, letters, and messages from customers across the country flooded the central office, each message telling a story, recounting an experience once overlooked, once dismissed moments when they felt powerless in the face of bias and arbitrary decisions in the banking system. Andrew Coleman sat quietly in his office, fingers lightly pressing the keys to take notes, eyes following each line, every detail described by the customers, feeling each heartbeat, each pain, each hope being restored, knowing that from this moment, every message was living proof of the power of fair action. Derek Hill stood beside him, notebook in hand, eyes shining with pride and determination. Seeing that both employees and customers were being heard, realizing that standing up for the truth not only delivered justice, but inspired those who had once been forgotten. The messages recounted customers who had been denied large transactions without reason, treated differently because of race, nationality, or address, who had felt humiliation with every breath upon entering a branch, and now were being acknowledged, a feeling that spread strongly, warming Andrew and the reform team. Each story was a cornerstone for cultural change throughout the bank. Andrew read every detail, noting customer names, dates, branches, carefully considering each corrective step and policy adjustment needed to ensure that no one would endure the same injustice again. At the same time, other branches began automatically reviewing records, recording and monitoring every transaction over $10,000, implementing automated alerts and guiding employees to follow each step strictly, because now every violation would be exposed and every arbitrary decision monitored. Social media continued spreading these stories, videos, customer comments, images of suspended employees and branch reforms, shared widely, becoming symbols of fairness and transparency, while creating a chain reaction that prompted competing banks to review their procedures and implement similar measures to protect their reputations. Meanwhile, branch managers and senior executives attended online meetings, observing charts and reports, identifying patterns of misconduct, understanding that accepting bias or arbitrary decisions was now impossible, and that every employee must be accountable for each decision. Andrew stood before a large screen, eyes tracking data from branch 14, and all other branches, voice calm but incisive. Every action, every transaction, every decision must be transparent and fair. There is no room for discretion. Every customer deserves respect. Meanwhile, Derek Hill moved across branches, guiding staff on applying the new system, checking every step, ensuring that every action was recorded, monitored, and reported to the CEO's office in case of any misconduct. Employees who had once been anxious now realized they were part of a truly fair system where customer voices and justice were paramount, and every proper action they took would be recognized and respected. Customers began returning to branches, noticing the immediate difference: transactions processed quickly, staff courteous, professional, and respectful, no longer met with scrutinizing eyes or invisible bias. Former customers sent letters expressing gratitude, recounting experiences that had been ignored, and the restored sense of fairness warmed both Andrew and the management team. These stories did not remain confined to Branch 14, but spread across all branches, creating a powerful effect throughout Sterling Bank, and the entire banking industry began to recognize that fairness and transparency were no longer theoretical, but vital responsibilities. Andrew sat quietly, reading each letter, each email, feeling the heartbeat of every customer in the stories they told, understanding that transparency and fairness had now become a solid foundation, creating change not only in employees, but in organizational culture. Social media, the press and customers alike, acknowledged this impact. Clips, articles, tweets and comments spreading rapidly, portraying Sterling Bank as a symbol of fairness. Competitor banks observed and began adjusting. Federal regulators increased oversight, and every step, every action, every response was recorded and analyzed. Andrew knew that from this moment, Sterling Bank had entered an entirely new chapter, where fairness was no longer a slogan, but a living action repeated daily, where every customer, regardless of race or background, was treated with absolute respect, and every unjust action would be scrutinized and held accountable, creating a sustainable foundation for the entire banking system. In the weeks following Sterling Bank's reforms, the bank entered an entirely new phase, where every branch, every employee, and every customer could feel the profound change brought by Andrew Coleman's decisive actions. From the emails, messages, and letters sent by customers, every story of a previously denied transaction, every expression of frustration with the bank now served as proof that fairness and transparency were no longer promises, but vital principles. Derek Hill moved across branches, inspecting every step of the new procedures, guiding staff on how to record and monitor transactions, how to enter reasons for denial, and how to report directly to the CEO's office if any injustice occurred. His eyes shone with pride as he saw employees adhering strictly to every detail, every step. Branch managers attended online meetings, watching charts displaying each branch, every transaction, every past violation, cross-checked and confirmed, realizing that previous errors now had no chance to persist, every action fully monitored and transparent. Social media continued spreading the story of the reforms, the clips of Andrew being dragged out, now paired with updates on the new procedures, admiration and support flooding in turning Sterling Bank into a symbol of fairness and transparency in banking. Customers began returning to branches with renewed confidence and attitude, transactions proceeding quickly, staff friendly, professional, and respectful, no longer met with scrutinizing eyes or discriminatory remarks, and each positive experience was shared, creating a ripple effect across other branches. Andrew observed from the central office, fingers lightly tapping the keyboard, eyes tracking reports, data, and customer feedback, recognizing that every action taken today was laying a sustainable foundation where decisions would now be based on data, fairness, and transparency, and any employee who violated protocols would be held accountable. Internal audit teams continued reviewing and recording every violation, standardizing procedures across all branches, emphasizing that fairness was no longer optional. Every transaction over $10,000 had to be recorded and monitored, and the automated alert system would supervise denials. Mandatory bias awareness and anti-discrimination training was implemented continuously, creating a new culture within the bank, where employees understood that every decision would be evaluated, every arbitrary action detected, and every customer deserved respect. Feedback from customers across branches continued to pour in, recounting experiences previously ignored now being heard and acknowledged, spreading a sense of fairness and renewed trust, allowing Andrew and the management team to feel the true power of transparency and respect. Social media and the press continued documenting the reforms hashtags Fair Banking Justice at Sterling CEO Action, becoming symbols of change within the industry, applying positive pressure on other banks to review and adopt similar measures, from recording and monitoring systems to employee training on awareness. Andrew stood in the operations room eyes, following charts, data, and feedback, knowing that every step taken today was not only transforming Sterling Bank, but creating a new standard for the entire banking industry, that the credibility of an organization is built on fairness, transparency, and customer trust. Derek Hill continued traveling to branches, supervising the implementation of the system, training employees, ensuring that all discriminatory behavior would be addressed strictly, while encouraging staff to actively participate in maintaining a culture of fairness. Andrew knew these actions would ripple outward, creating a Sterling Bank with no room for bias, where every customer is treated with absolute respect, every decision is based on data and fairness, and every violation is scrutinized and accountable. Customers immediately noticed the changes, sharing positive experiences, sending letters, emails, and messages of thanks, and this effect continued to spread, inspiring the entire industry, making Sterling Bank a symbol of transparency and fairness. Andrew observed everything, eyes bright with conviction and determination, knowing that from this moment, every decision, every action, every policy must adhere to the principles of fairness and transparency. And Sterling Bank had entered a completely new chapter, where fairness was no longer a slogan, but a living practice repeated daily, reinforcing customer trust, enhancing the institution's credibility, and laying the foundation for a banking industry built on absolute respect, where any arbitrary or biased behavior would be exposed under the light of truth and held accountable, marking a historic turning point that Andrew Coleman had courageously initiated. From the perspective of an expert in organizational management and corporate culture, Andrew Coleman's journey at Sterling Bank demonstrates an undeniable truth. Real power does not lie in a title or the ability to give orders, but in how we use that power to protect human dignity and respect. A single unjust moment, a decision based on seemingly minor bias, can shatter trust that an organization has built over many years. Yet that very moment, if met with courage and transparency, can become a catalyst for deep and lasting change. Sterling Bank did not transform merely by dismissing a few employees, but by restructuring the entire system, placing fairness, transparency, and accountability above all, turning every transaction, every decision, into living proof of a new culture. If this story resonates with you, like the video to spread the message of fairness and responsible power, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories where people stand up against injustice, and comment the phrase fairness to remind each other that lasting change begins with brave and transparent actions every day. Remember, fairness is not a slogan, but an action repeated consistently, and each of us has the potential to be a catalyst for change.